welcome to the Nitschke podcast. Today we've got a repeat guest, Maddie Nitschke.
Thanks
Welcome.
for having me.
Thanks for coming.
I'm really happy to get invited back.
Yeah, well, look, it's interesting because we have had such intense requests from our audience. We've got questions about property management. We need the expert, so welcome.
Give the people what they want.
Absolutely, that's what we do on the Nitschke pod today. So, Maddie, thanks for coming in. So today we're talking applying for a rental property, and I think it's interesting because we, in earlier webcam editions of this pod, we have covered this topic before, and that space has changed so dramatically. Probably the most notable change I would suggest would be the market itself, because I think we did that pod, I'm going to say maybe 18 months ago.
Yeah.
What's happening right now in the applying for rental space?
Yeah, look, if anything, it's probably more challenging than it was 18 months ago. In terms of the housing supply issue, it just seems to be getting worse and worse, to be quite honest. And then obviously the demand on top of that. So it's really a similar pattern, but just even tighter knit issues, I suppose.
It's amazing, isn't it? What do you think's driving? I suppose let's start with the demand. I think we know what's happening with supply, because essentially existing tenants are renewing leases, aren't they, as much as they can?
Yeah.
Very little break leases. It does happen, but there's a bit, but not much. And then obviously you've got, on the supply front, investors are selling because the market has been extraordinarily good on the selling front, best we've ever had.
Absolutely.
So that's your supply. But what do you think's driving demand? Do you think it's more demand than normal, or do you think it's just that supply has never been worse?
It feels a bit like a combination, to be honest, because in recent times we've had quite a few interstate tenants from New South Wales in particular, so looking at like your eastern states, but also from overseas. We've had a couple recently from New Zealand relocating. I think things...
Across the ditch.
That's it. I think things over there have been a little bit tricky in their economy. So it's a pretty mixed bag. Like you say, it's been such a good market to sell. And as you say, tenants aren't really moving. If you can get a lease renewal right now, that's what you're wanting to do. You want to stay put.
Totally.
So yeah, that's what we're noticing, and it's just a real demand for family properties. So your 3 to 4 bed, 2 bathrooms, a couple of living areas is ideal. But just the shift in the price too is really challenging for people.
Well, there's been talk that this year rents will go up $100 a week in our area. And I remember when I saw that forecast, it shocked me. We're now approaching the middle of the year, and it's happening, isn't it?
It well and truly is happening.
Wow. Yeah. So if what are the trends you're starting to see then in the application space? We've made some big changes, I suppose, maybe starting with our business. Talk through what some of the changes your team's implemented to try and help reduce the friction in applying for a rental.
We made a big move. We moved from one form to apply. I'm going to say 6 to 8 months ago, probably, or maybe even longer.
Probably.
Game changer for us in terms of the background admin side of it, but it's a lot more user friendly for tenants. We just found that the previous software was a bit clunky, and with To Apply, they can upload everything on their phone really simply. If it's a couple applying together, you start your application. If it was you and I, I'd send it on to you to then do your half, and it joins it together automatically. So user-friendly has been a huge difference for people as well, I think. And from our side as well, at an open, they get sent the link straight away. They don't need to then jump onto a different website or anything. It's just right there on their phone while they're at the property.
That's great.
Yeah.
And also then, my understanding with that too is then other agencies that use the same software, then that application profile stays with that tenant, doesn't it?
Yeah, which also, again, is user-friendly, isn't it? So you can set up a profile, go to a property, put your application against it, go to another one, same thing. Just makes life easier. I can't imagine being a tenant right now, applying for multiple properties and then having to use multiple platforms on top of that, trying to locate your pay slips all the time. That kind of stuff would be really frustrating, I would have thought. So
yeah, particularly when you have that friction on top of what we've just taken our audience through, which is the market pressures that are here to stay, unfortunately. I don't think that's changing in the short term.
No.
So That's really interesting. So I guess if you're independent of To Apply, which is a great software, and look, it's fair to say in our industry there is a number of really good options
Yeah,
out there, and
absolutely.
different agencies make decisions for whatever reason around what product they want to go with in their tech stack.
Yeah.
I guess if you're a tenant considering applying for a rental property for the first time in this market, regardless of the software, what are the steps? What are some of the first steps you need to take to be ready for this?
Look, it's about making sure references know that we're going to be in touch, whether it's via email or calling, just so that you can get those responses straight away. Having your ID ready to go. I know for us, we require a fair bit of ID to get your application submitted. So making sure you've got your birth certificate on hand, passport if you've got one, driver's license, Medicare, all of that. Making sure everything's up to date that you've got as well. Those things are really important to get started. And I think if you can chat with an agency as well, that's helpful. Like, it's worth doing a ring around, seeing if you can find out if anything's coming up off market. A lot of the agencies locally would have a database of some description, and I'm sure you could have a conversation. I know for one that we have a dedicated team member to help in that space, and that's been really important for us.
Yeah, so if a tenant's interested in finding a rental property, obviously with our business, how would they start, to get on that list?
Just a phone call through to the office would be the first step, or jump on our website, put an inquiry through on one of our properties. Also, when I'm at opens with people, I'm regularly chatting to them to say, look, if you don't get this one, what are you after? Getting their information through to the team right then and there to see how we can help.
Absolutely.
Makes a huge difference.
Well, it's more efficient, isn't it? And it's about helping people move, which is a big driver of our industry and what we do.
Yeah. And like you said too, just sorry to add, you're adding that combined with the emotions people are feeling right now with families, having a couple of weeks to have found something else because the property's sold or their lease is up to then sell. People are dealing with a lot. So if there's a way that you can try to get yourself ahead, or we can try to help you, I think it's worth your while. So
absolutely. I think what can add to the confusion for a lot of people is that I know different agencies have different approaches with how soon you need to apply. So in our business, for example, we allows a bit confronting, but we encourage people to inspect properties and then apply later.
Yeah.
They can apply early if they choose to, but there are some agencies that restrict inspections until you've applied, which there's no right or wrong. I can understand friction on either side.
Absolutely.
It's pretty important then for tenants to be clear about what approach is needed for the property they're interested in.
That's exactly right. And I would always rather someone give me a phone call ahead of time. And I have had that with a few people lately, to ring and say, look, I'm coming to the open. Have I missed anything? Should I be applying now? What's your process? How do you do it? I agree. I think there's pros and cons to both versions. I personally really like the way that we do it. Everyone comes along, you all get a chance to apply after seeing it, and we go from there. I think if I put myself in a tenant's shoes, I think that would be my preference anyway, because otherwise you're applying off the back of some photos and not really the house itself.
I agree, because the other method kind of feels like a secret ballot where you kind of throw your name in and you hope your name gets called out, versus at least you're getting a chance to see the property. Look, not every inspection attendee applies. It's not like the market's strong, but it's not that strong that you feel like you're competing with 10 other people if you're at a group capped at 10.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So what are some things then, a tenant tuning in today, how can they help their cause, to help their application to stand out? You've touched on some of the early steps in terms of collating information, but is there anything else they can do to secure a property right now?
I had a story this week actually with a tenant who secured a property through us, and a comment she made to me was that she didn't she didn't think she even stood a chance, because there was 22 people at the open, and she said, I'll just have a go, and good on her for having a go. I mean, she ended up with a lease out of it, right? So that was really good. So I think no matter what, you might go to an open and there's 20 to 30 people there, but they're not all going to apply. And I think everyone should first of all have a go. But there's been some tenants lately sending through a cover letter, which can help, can pass that on to a landlord, and it helps them, the landlord, I suppose, relate to you as more than just the paper version of you, if that makes sense. So they might be adding photos of their family or their pets, some background on them, that sort of thing. So those things are helping people at the moment. And I guess just making sure that you're registered against the properties, you're in the database, you're getting the updates and the communication about the properties going onto the net and that sort of thing too.
Perfect. What role does a property manager play? So when you've got, let's say there's 6 applications,
Yeah.
they're all strong for a hotly contested property that's available. What role do you and your team play then with the landlord, like to, you know, in terms of the final decision-making process? What does that look like in our business
Yeah.
once the applications have been collated? How do you present that? What's the process then?
Generally, the way that I would do it, and the team are alike in this, is I would have a phone call conversation with the landlord first of all, give them a bit of a rundown on each individual applicant, perhaps where they're moving from or what their employment is, their family, pets, that sort of thing. But then through To Apply, we have the ability to create basically a PDF of their application and send that through to a landlord, which gives the information, obviously holding back, you know, private information that you don't disclose, but
It's like
gives
a
them a
summary,
background.
really.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just a summary for them. And then generally after that, there's probably another phone call to try to give a bit more background on people. Obviously, we've met them, so we can shed some light on people as well, but it is really up to the landlord in the end to make the decision about what's the right fit for them. But it's hard at the moment too for landlords.
I'd imagine, and I'm aware of many examples where landlords can't choose because there's some incredible stories or incredibly strong applicants. Someone's got to get it. But I like your comment before and that case study from this week. That sometimes it is about just having a go, participating, because I know in the podcast that we did recently with Daniel on the sales side of things, it's very similar when people are looking at offering on a property that you only need to secure one property. Like once you've secured it, you're out of the market. And I know that's easy for the real estate agent in the room to say that, but you know, there's so many times where a tenant didn't apply and they could have got it, but they don't know. So go through the process.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean. Just because there's 20 to 30 people at an open, you might get 5 of them apply for it, and you could be in the mix of that 5 rather than the 20 to 30. So
Totally.
yeah, just goes to show you, I think it's worth just having a go. What have you got to lose, essentially?
I agree. Anything else you'd like to add in the application space that could, you know, help as an insight for a landlord or a tenant? I mean, you've covered things off really well today, and there's clearly been a lot of developments in that space since the last podcast.
Yeah, I think they really would be the main things. I think it's about making the phone call to the agent, introduce yourself, making sure that you're there at the open as well, to have a discussion with them. And as we were saying, making sure you know with that agency how they do things so that you're not missing out. I think those things are really important. And as I say, if you can have an option to be in a database or an option for something coming up off market, it's always worthwhile just reaching out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Thanks.
Maddie, you might even get invited again on the Nitschke podcast.
That'd be so
We'll have to see. We're in the hands of the audience. We always are. But I really appreciate your time as always. Thank you for being a part of the Nitschke podcast and for all the great work that you and your team do helping this tenants and landlords navigate the market we're in today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me. We'll see the views ratio. That might determine if I get back.
I suspect it will. Thanks, Maddie.
Thank you.